Hello and welcome to the Deep to NBA podcast. My name's Sean and joining me as always is the one and only Dante Boffman. Mr. Boffman, man, how are we?
Happy Spotify rap today, Sean.
Oh, you had this prepared. You had it ready. You've gotten really good at coming into my house and not saying your most pressing conversation until we hit the little record button.
How do you know that I'm not just a spur of the moment, flying by the seat of my pants type operator?
It was too quick. All right. Well, I'll gloat for a little bit on the Spotify Wrapped.
I'll give you the floor first because I'm gonna fucking gloat.
I mean, what are we gloating about? But I had just under 92,000 minutes.
Yeah, man, that's child's play.
How many podcast minutes you get? I had 24,000.
I actually listened to so few podcasts on Spotify that it didn't even give me a podcast section.
What do you YouTube?
I use Apple Podcasts.
Why?
I don't know. I've been using it since I was a child.
Yeah, me too. And I stopped this year.
What a good thing, what a good reason why I like to have the two apps is.
Yeah.
Because if I'm listening to something on Spotify, I am halfway through an album or a playlist or whatever. If I'm changing over between a podcast and the songs on Spotify, then I lose it. Whereas if I have a different app for the podcast, I never lose where I'm up to on Spotify.
Yeah, right. I get that. All right, may as well go through it. My top listen. Have I got it here? Yeah. I was in the top 0.05% of Glen Underground listeners. There aren't many of them. I happen to be up the top. And then a couple of other dudes. 2 of my top 5 most listened songs were on the Normal People soundtrack.
You are actually... that's very in character. Hey, by the way, have you seen that Daisy Edgar Jones is in War of the Worlds and it's being advertised on SBS when you're watching the footy?
No, because I've only been watching the highlights, but I'm in this group. I'm in this Facebook
Daisy
group.
Edgar Jones.
No. I mean, it's like normal people, bbc.uk updates every time they're at a red carpet or something.
Well, she's in War of the Worlds, and
didn't they already do War of the Worlds?
Yeah, they did, but they did it again. She's in it, and my brother pointed it out to me, and I said, "Don't tell Sean." Don't tell Sean. What was your most played song?
Surprise Chef.
Surprise Chef, yeah. Bloody beautiful.
Yeah, because I told you, listen to them. All news is good news.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, listen to my most plays of that song were on 9/11.
Wow. I mean, salute to service, am I right?
All right, well, what do you got?
All right, so my most played song was Undertow by Warpaint, which is a song that I actually first heard a remix of on my favourite radio show, which is Moxie's 2 Hour every Wednesday on NTS. Check it out if you haven't. And then I went and found the actual song. It's like an indie rock song from 2010, and it's just absolutely spectacular. My bloody top 5, coming in at number 1, The Slingers. Well deserved. Richly deserved. Top 0.1%, so I'm in there.
Well, not as much as I am with Glenn, but that's all right. Can I also mention Glenn Underground? He's so small that when I followed him on Instagram, he followed me back.
Yeah, well, I mean, Glenn Underground is just a class act like that. He's been known in the industry for doing stuff like that for a long time. Notables from my top 5 artists.
What?
Romar has been on a steady top 5 streak for like the last 5 years. He's an absolute king. His new album is fantastic. At number 2, we've got Alt J.
And then
a throwback based solely on their album from like March this year, The Dream, which was so beautiful. Literally listening to it makes me cry.
But first, Dante's number 3. Take it away. Why the fuck a Pearl Jam there?
Pearl Jam is in there because Pearl Jam's fucking awesome. And I love Pearl Jam. And coming in at number 5, taking a tumble all the way down from number 1 last year. Number 1 with a bullet. It's Hosier.
Yeah, no, good charm.
Anyway,
not even a bullet, a lead fart, if you will.
My Hosier did feature on 2 of my
That's wild. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Hosier's just fucking awesome. He's just a sick cunt.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, bloody good to chat to you about
the tunes. I'll talk to you next week.
So a little bit of housekeeping during the week. Yesterday morning or this morning, up on thedeep2.com, which is where you can find long form, short form, insightful analysis of everything happening in the NBA world, as well as every single episode of the Deep 2 NBA podcast. That's thedeep2.com. You bloody published an article about everybody's favourite 3-and-D wing who's finally putting it all together in the Pacific Northwest, Aaron Gordon.
Yeah, right. Aaron Gordon is, he's the fifth option, sometimes fourth option on the Denver Nuggets. And it's always been like, awesome, this is a beautiful spot for him to be in. Like, he's finally actually going to realize himself in Denver. But he's actually, might be, pushing for the third option. And, at the very least, might be the best fourth option in the whole entire playoffs when they roll around. I don't want to give away too much, but check it out. And I talk about the ramifications for, and not really ramifications. That's got negative connotations. So more the benefits of having your fourth option just absolutely shoot the fucking shit out of the ball. Like he is. Yeah, I mean, I sent this to Dante a week ago to edit. And his numbers in that article were just off the paper. Like, oh my god, this is very, very good. What number does it start with? It rhymes with Bevan. But the numbers have actually gotten bigger. In a week later, obviously, time to publish the article, time to update the stats, and it's just skyrocketed, which is
a little hot streak.
Not even a little hot streak. He's just consistently 9 of 15 from the floor, and it's that's repeatable.
The thing that I think is so interesting about you mentioned him being the best fourth option in the playoffs. He's gonna be the fourth option in the playoffs.
Yeah,
and a team like Portland has someone who's a very comparable player in terms of age and profile. Jeremy Grant is probably going to be their second option, or their 2.5 option. And I don't know about you, but I would so much rather have Aaron Gordon than Jeremy Grant just in a vacuum. But for Aaron Gordon to be your fourth option versus another playoff hopeful having Jeremy Grant as a secondary shot creator is just an embarrassment of riches for Denver.
And also, funny you mentioned that because Jeremy Grant left Denver in free agency because he wanted to get a bigger opportunity elsewhere. But the person who was traded for to replace him is actually, like you just said, you'd rather have him, and he's shining brighter than he is in Portland. But all credit to Jeremy Grant. He's having a very good season and a much better season than you and I thought he would in Portland at the moment. But final piece of housekeeping. While I put the light on, do you want to talk about the Socceroos for a minute?
The bloody Socceroos have only gone and done it. And I'll tell you what, channeling John Aloisi, who was a much maligned figure in Socceroos history before scoring, up till now, the most iconic goal in Socceroos history. Matthew Leckie, who hasn't done a single good thing at this World Cup in approximately 250 minutes on the pitch, before scoring that absolutely majestic solo strike where he's taken the ball from just inside halfway, taken it, carried it 40 yards, dribbled past 3 players, and then slotted with his left foot through the defender's legs, nestling the ball in the far post. Wow. Simply... I'll tell you what, to borrow a phrase from our friends, the British, limbs in the away end in my living room this morning when every single...
Were you up for it?
Yeah. Every single person in the living room, of which there was 5, was up in arms, out of the bloody chairs, going, whoa! Absolutely.
Right.
It's the stuff that dreams are made of.
Alright, and then speaking of dreams, as I like to dream, I had a look at it and went, okay, Argentina lost 2-0 to Saudi Arabia. 2-1. Saudi Arabia.
Great game of footy.
Maybe one of the weaker Argentinian teams we've seen.
They got a lot of credit and a lot of hype going in, and I
Messi's
personally didn't buy it. I was looking at the list thinking this is a bunch of blokes who are legends but past their prime. All blokes who were just good starters for good first division teams in Europe, but no one who's absolutely bloody blowing you away. 3 or 4 guys who are blowing you away, and then the rest of them are just good level guys. Versus a team like Brazil or France, Spain looking really good. Team. Yeah, you've got the best guys from the best clubs.
So I didn't actually want any analysis there because what I'm going to say is stupid. Let's say...
Well, now I'm going to have egg on my face then for taking it seriously.
Well, we're both going to have egg on our face because we're saying we have a chance against Argentina. But let's say we beat Argentina 1-0 in a nail biter.
Yeah.
As would be the only way we win a game 1-0. And then let's just assume USA wins their game because it seems to be their cup where it's like, oh, they're here. And
does it seem to be their cup?
Not
or
at
are
all,
you just
not at all.
following Americans on Twitter?
I'm just following Americans on Instagram. We can beat America. They're actually not that good. We know that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we're in the semi-finals.
Okay. All right, we'll pump the brakes. We'll pump the brakes on that one.
It's the hope that kills you, but it's actually the stupidity that gets you first, if not the hope.
All right, well, before we jump into today's episodes, final piece of housekeeping. A big congratulations to the Victorian Labor Party for winning a third consecutive term in office. And the question that I want to pose to you
is, why did you write that in the run sheet?
How could Dean Andrews let this happen? No, but in all seriousness, the Deep to NBA podcast does not endorse the Labor Party. All right. Now we've made it political. Let's talk about everyone's favourite apolitical Slovene, Luka Doncic.
If Luka Doncic was political, where would he fall?
Luka Doncic is 100% progressive.
Yeah, he's got the world map on his shoulder
He's
blade.
from the Balkans, so he probably has some pretty like concerning views about like some things, but I think in general he's a progressive guy.
Yeah, right. He's probably used some slurs, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can read between the lines. Yeah, I'm throwing Nikola Jokic in there as well. Like, they have the same energy.
You're saying at that dinner in the bubble, when all the guys from the Balkans brought up over a couple of, let's say, Stellas.
Yeah. Thank God there were no
microphones there as well.
Yeah.
Just beer. Yeah, right. That makes sense. All right, so Luka Doncic, we wanted to talk about this last week, but we said, no, hold off. We'll give ourselves a week to, let's say, research it. Can Luka Doncic keep this up? Before today's games, which he didn't play in, so I shouldn't have said that, he's averaging 33.5 points, 8.8 rebounds, 8.6 assists while shooting 51, 32, 72 from the floor. Just like a bad free throw shooter and has been his whole entire career. He's got
a bit of LeBron about him in that way. Just like, bro, you're literally incredible. Bump that free throw number up by 10 points.
Yeah. PR of 31.4 with a usage percentage of 42.3. Can I say this is his fifth year in the league? For the fifth consecutive year, he's leading the league in terms of usage percentage for his position. I didn't sort of see where it was in the league, but he has been up there ever since his rookie year when he averaged about 16 points. He
averaged way more in his rookie year.
Did he?
Yeah, 20 plus, I reckon.
Wow. Let's deep to fact check this, Jamie.
Let's get the bloody. Hold on. I've got it here. We're looking at 21 points.
21, wow.
21 points as a rookie.
Freak am I. Anyway, Luka Doncic is doing amazing things, and I think like we can. If you don't think he's the MVP through the quarter of the season or for the full way, like he deserves an MVP award, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's say. Okay,
I mean, I don't actually think he would be the MVP or should be the MVP.
Okay, but he's a top 3 candidate.
Yeah, for sure.
Every single person.
He's absolutely got one of the first team All NBA forward spots fucking locked up.
Yeah. If he gets the season-ending injury today, he probably still gets the second team. Can he keep this up? What do you think, Dante?
I think the answer is yes, he can keep it up. From a numbers point of view and from a working through the season point of view, because I think they know how to manage him on like a game by game basis. But what you've already seen through the first quarter of the season is that inside the game, his workload takes a toll on him, where he's been markedly more efficient in the first 3 quarters, particularly the first quarter when he's fresh compared to the fourth quarter, and he actually hasn't been able to maintain those kind of levels that the standard that he sets through the first 3 quarters into the fourth quarter. Aside from that epic fourth quarter he had against the Clippers a few weeks ago, where he just fucking seems to love going up against the Clippers.
Yeah, which is actually a cool little narrative.
It's an awesome little narrative, and you know what? I'm so confident that the Clippers will never get past it. Like, the Clippers just won't be able to do it. From here on out, like, he's got them. But I think whilst he can keep it up, we definitely have seen that drop off, and I think that it's really clear that the Mavericks need a plan this season for who's going to help kind of step in and redistribute a little bit of that second half workload, and then beyond as well. That's something that I'm sure we'll touch on in a few minutes. But the start to the season that he's having is again like genuinely historic, and he's just so metronomically consistent with the way that he plays and the things that he's able to do. But one thing that's jumped out to me thus far is that the usage is all on him. Brunson is gone. So we've gone from this lauded 3-ball handler lineup that they were so successful with last year to now they're only being 2, and he's by far the primary. Yet he's still bumped up his shooting efficiency from last year by 5 percentage points. And he's averaging the lowest turnovers per game of his career since his rookie season. Which is like for someone to be increasing their usage by such a drastic proportion, shooting more efficiently and still reducing their turnovers, like that is just like a guy who's really at the peak of his powers.
And you and I love to talk about the guys who go from like good to great or like great to amazing, instead of just talking about like, Anthony Simons gets an opportunity, all of a sudden averages 20 points a game. Like this is he was already an MVP candidate for the past 2 years, and you've got a guy who's like doing things no one has ever done before, and he's actually just getting a little bit more efficient and a little bit better. But like I think it is sustainable, and the fourth quarter stuff is obviously worrying, and he is like visibly exhausted. I mean, every single NBA player usually is by the fourth quarter, but he is definitely visibly exhausted. He has those amazing first quarters. He does everything right. But I went into this week of watching games with the mindset of, okay, I think, what's it called in a scientific study where you go in with what you think's going to happen?
A hypothesis.
My hypothesis was, Thursday's going to roll around, Dunto and I are going to be sucking on a beer, and I'm going to be like, it's too much to put on one person, James Harden couldn't do it. But I was actually surprised when I watched the first game and went, oh, maybe not. And then I watched the second game, which was when they beat the Golden State Warriors, and I was like, no.
When they beat the Golden State Warriors and he had a 40-point triple-double.
I mean, it's a good game to watch, right? It's a good game to watch him do well. But it is actually like the way the Dallas Mavericks play is obviously based all around him. But there's a lot of time where he doesn't have the ball in his hands. And yes, he's got these gargantuan usage percentage numbers. But it's a lot of him like the Mavs know, and Jason Kidd knows that he can beat his matchup no matter who it is. And so he'll just create an opening, and whether that's just a simple pass behind his back to DFS for a wide open 3 or a lob or whatever it is. But it is like, there is quite a bit of movement, and then all of a sudden, as soon as he like breaks down that first defender, it's like, okay, Spencer Dinwiddie, here's this defender who's trailing to come and get you. Josh Green, who's having a great season shooting it from 3, taking like 2 point something a game, but he's still shooting it really well. All these shooters, Tim Hardaway Jr. has just come back. It's like, everyone's actually doing everything perfectly, and Luka isn't dribbling it for 20 seconds like James Harden did before a step back. Luka does sprinkle in the step backs, and he does do that stuff where he goes, oh, I need to bail them out, and I'm fucking incredible at basketball. He's actually never missed a shot when it's coming down to the end of the shot clock, because he actually always gets fouled. Not always called, but he always gets fouled, and he likes to let the refs know and then not run back on defense. But poor guy. Imagine getting fouled 100% of the time and not getting 100% of the whistles. But
you'd be frustrated too.
Yeah. But it is actually like it is different to what we've seen to the bearded man who wears red. Like, Luka is moving off the ball and he's relocating, and he goes, okay, I've passed it out here, DFS is going to get covered, he's going to swing it to that next guard over there, and then Luka's relocating and just filling his spot. And it's like, this is good. I don't think you can win a title, and we'll talk about what they can do in the offseason and what trades might be out there where they can get, another Jalen Brunson, or hopefully someone better than Jalen Brunson. But it isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, and I've actually come away with it like, oh, actually, you know what? This is sustainable. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the difference, you mentioned the bearded one from Houston. I think Luka has more Steph in him than he does Harden or Trey.
Yeah.
In that he is prepared to get off the ball, he's prepared to move the ball, and there's that Steph-like confidence that means getting off the ball early in the shot clock doesn't mean that you're out of the play. It means if you keep moving, the ball's going to come back to you. And that's part of the reason why he's able to maintain such a high usage rate, is because he's giving up the ball and it's coming back to him. Because he's moving, he's spotting up, and then he's in an advantageous position to attack again. So he's still finishing those possessions at an all-time league-leading rate, but not in the same way that a Harden or a Trae have previously done it, where you do hold the ball for 20 seconds and then you score, or you pass to the guy who shoots it.
Yeah.
There's a healthier offensive ecosystem, and Jason Kidd has kind of instituted that. And yes, it's all driven on the court by Luka, but like the buy-in to get your best guy to play like that is a really good coaching job. I absolutely hate to say those words about Jason Kidd.
But he has done a great job.
But he has done a really good job. And
also, another thing to Jason Kidd's credit, like they gave 3 years at the full mid-level exception to JaVale McGee, and we all thought it was a bad idea. I actually thought it was a little bit of a better idea, but it's turned out to be a shocking idea.
It was a taxpayer.
As a full taxpayer, but 3 years, and he hasn't been good at basketball, and Jason Kidd's playing him 3 minutes a game. It's like he has said, I don't give a shit what the front office has invested here. Yeah. He's not a basketball player. Every
coach that has had DeAndre Jordan since 2017 needs to take notes and say, maybe I should have not played the awful old center. Although, respects to JaVale, he has a dear place in my heart as a backup five for the last few years.
It's not his fault he got given 3 years at the TP.
No, it's to his credit. I mean, his agent should be having a fucking beer in Cancun right now.
But keep going.
Kidd has done a really good job with the buy-in from Luka, but also, like, you look at the roster, it's a bad roster. They're relying on guys who are not good offensive players, and their offensive, the guys that are good offensive players, are limited. Like, Spencer Dinwiddie is having like an amazing shooting season, and I don't know how sustainable that is, because
I think it has to be now. He's had like 2 years of shooting it well.
His one bugaboo his whole career has been like he's actually a way worse shooter than you think he is.
But he's not. Ever since he put on a Dallas uniform.
Yeah, I mean, like,
we've got such a big sample size now.
Well, we've got less than a full season, but
20 games plus 40.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a full Zion season.
That's 2 full Zion seasons. Point taken. Someone like Tim Hardaway, who's missed forever, it feels like, with a foot injury and is now just coming back. He's not like fully clicked into gear yet, but you imagine that he will kind of return to being the handy player that he is.
What's a clicked in Tim Hardaway?
I actually I've been higher on Tim Hardaway than you. This the last few years we've been doing it, because he just like he's that like bigger two guard who makes his threes.
Yeah.
You kick. He moves off the ball. You kick it out to him, and he hits his threes when he's supposed to. Like, he's like Danny Green if Danny Green hit threes when he's supposed to.
And couldn't defend.
Yeah, I mean, Danny Green is a way better defender, but offensively.
Yeah.
But DFS, he's having a really bad shooting year. Josh Green is like not actually that well-rounded of a player. Chris Wood, who we'll touch on in a little bit, has been good for them, but like he's by no means a sustainable second option on a playoff team.
No.
And somehow, through this combination of Luka tying everything together, but also scheming from Kidd and like the actual fundamental principles of his offense being executed, which is not something that every coach can say is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, like, let's have a look at what's going on in Los Angeles with both teams for an example of where the coach's principles are not being executed, because what the fuck's going on there. It's a great credit to Kidd and Luka on that front to be able to have a great offense without guys who you would typically associate with being a great offense, or there's 3 guys on the court at any one time who are fifth options, and no guys who are second or third or fourth options.
Yeah, it's like we say all this, and and I agree with everything you've said, and it does look really good, and I have been surprised at how good it looks, but they're the 11th seed right now.
They're playing 500 ball, which is the reason. Which is, you mentioned like the Luka MVP case, like you're not the MVP if your team is playing 500 ball. Like that. To me,
asterisk that they are 4.5 games behind the 1 seed and 2.5 behind the 3 seed.
But 5, like the games at this point are, can be reasonably misleading.
We've had 20 games now.
If you're a 500 team, you're realistically in the West. Right now we're looking at the standings. You're saying they're 11th. You're out of the plane if you're playing 500. So to be in the plane, realistically, you got to be minimum like 44, 45. And this offense is really good, but the team is just limited. And we talked about in the off season that this is kind of a logical year for them to just accept that this is going to be a step back and that they might be worse, and to not get sucked into that like narrative of like, you're wasting this amazing season from Luka. Luka's going to be a Mav for 15 years. You're going to get plenty more amazing seasons.
He's going to average 30 points again.
You're in a situation where you kind of fucked up on the KP trade. You've got no assets. You've decided to let Bronson walk, but you still have no cap space. You just need like that reset season. And I think having a steady approach to that from GM Nico Harrison and Kid, and not panicking and saying like, whoa, we need to trade XYZ for whatever the hell we can get at the deadline so we can maybe move up from the 8th seed to the 6th seed, is going to be a virtue in the long run. But that, that itself speaks to Luka's excellence thus far, that the franchise has correctly made this decision to say, we're not going to bust our ass to give you the absolute best supporting cast that you possibly can
right
now, and yet this team is still good, and they're a tough beat, and the offense is playing really well, and Luka's putting up 33 8 and 8.
Well, let's move on from that and say how can this team get better, because like you said this in the off season as well. You said, okay, look, they're going to take sort of a gap year where it's like, Luka, get your MVP, you're going to be the 1, 2, 3, and then Christian Wood's going to be the 4. So Luka, do this, and then we'll regroup and see what happens there. But like, what are they getting? Like, it's not like they're going to get a high pick. They're just going to have another pick to trade in the future when the offseason hits.
I also think this year's draft pick is owed to the Wizards in the Porzingis trade.
Okay. And then if I had done this before I started talking, I'd look at their contract situation. But we know that cap space isn't the most valuable thing for teams not based in Los Angeles. Their 2 expirings are Christian Wood and Dwight Powell. Obviously, if Christian Wood is good at basketball, you'd want to retain him. So you're just going to have to re-sign him at a bigger number than that. Spencer Dinwiddie is, I think it's like only like $1 million guaranteed next year. It doesn't say it here, but it's something very small.
And is he on like 17?
21 the following year.
That's okay.
And then you're paying Bertans and Tim Hardaway 17 each for the next 2 seasons after this. So there's money to be lost, and then to throw away in free agency. Look, free agency is a very hard game to play, so I don't know how they're going to get better there. But like this team, Luka Doncic might make the second round this year, and he might win the MVP. And it's like, all right, wonderful. Now, how do you get better? And I liken it again to James Harden, where James Harden, Daryl Morey went out and got Chris Paul, and all of a sudden they went from a really good team to me being a Golden State fan. Holy shit, they could actually beat us. And unluckily for them, they lost to us twice in the Western Conference Finals, and they were very, very, very close series. And obviously, Chris Paul and James Harden were up 3-2 in one of those series, where they arguably could have won and should have won. So how does Luka Doncic get his Chris Paul? And I don't really know how you bring in a second star like that. And you mentioned the bird rights trap with Jalen Brunson, and it's a little bit unfair to them because Jalen Brunson obviously had the ties to New York and wanted to go there, and he was an unrestricted free agent. So there's not much you really could have done, even if it's a bad financial play. He wanted to leave, but I think, going back to what I said at the start, I think it's sustainable, and I think they can be a very good, top 6, top 4 seed for the next 10 years while Luka's here. But I want to see them, push all their chips in to get another superstar to be the Chris Paul next to Luka Doncic. But I don't know how they do that right now.
Yeah, but the problem with the pushing in of the chips is that they already did that with KP, and they're like a little bit sparse because of it, and that went wrong. So you can say that was under a previous regime. They rectified the mistake. They got KP out, recruited some assets, and we'll go from there. But like the risk is if you get that wrong again, you have to push chips in on the right guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think more prescient than like how they would do it from an asset point of view, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. The first thing that you have to figure out is who or what type of player is gonna be the second guy that complements Luka, because you could go the CP route and get another point guard, and we've seen them have success with a stack of really good point guards last season. You could go the Clippers route and you could try and pair two really great big wings together, or you could go a more traditional route and try and bring in a big man. And I would be leaning towards the big man, because a good big man is kind of playoff proof, whereas small guards who are defensive sieves, which Brunson is a great feisty defender, and he's like really good defending the post. He's really strong, but a predatory apex wing is going to make light work of him come the postseason. And this team, the whole time that Luke has been there, has just had an objectively bad big rotation. Because the guys that we're talking about now is Christian Wood, Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, JaVale McGee. Like,
all good players, but yeah.
But I mean, like, I don't actually think that, like I think Wood is like a starting level player. He's not starting for the Mavs right now. They're bringing him off the bench in a sixth man capacity. None of the other guys are starters. Like, Maxi Kleber has been their starting 4. Sometimes they're starting 5 for the last 3 years. I don't think Maxi Kleber is a starting level player. I have been talking about this whole run that we've done, this 3.5 years we've been doing the pod. What would Luka look like with a real, like, defensive linchpin role man on offense? Like, what would Luka look like if you just kind of, like, made, like, the role principles from, like, a Utah or an Atlanta over the last few years with a rim detonating big man on offense? What would that look like if you had Luka, a Gobert, a Capella, whoever you want to put in there, and then 3 shooters? What does that look like? And I think that offense is more sustainable, not to mention that you're able to do more on defense, because Maxi Kleber is a good defender, but he's also slight, and he's also kind of undersized to be playing the 5 full time. And on offense, he's a good shooter. He's a great stretch 5, but he doesn't actually roll that well over and over again, and he doesn't give you anything in between. So I feel like exploring how to bring in a big man is kind of a better move for this team than looking to strengthen on the wing or looking to bring in another elite guard. If you assume that they have one guy that through free agency or trade in the next, let's say, 2 seasons, they can bring in one all-star level player, I would be looking more at bringing in a 4 and a 5 than anybody else.
Well, maybe Gobert's going to be available this offseason as well if the Timberwolves want to cut bait. But
that's a whole nother thing.
But just going back to your Maxi Kleber point, for the whole 3.5 years we've been doing this, I've been loving Maxi Kleber, and you've been everything you just said. I think he tops out, and he is topping out as a really, really good backup 4-5.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I agree.
All right, I'll also fact check us before. Their pick this year is owed to the Knicks, top 10 protected, and then they own every single one of their future picks. Outside of that, free agent centers coming up this offseason. Al Horford, Nick Vucevic, Miles Turner has been rumoured to go there before. Brook Lopez, Dwight Powell, Jakob Poeltl. We're getting very little.
I don't like any of those. The best name on that list in terms of like what we're talking about, how can this team be sustainable?
Potential all-stars, Miles
Turner. But Miles Turner, for better or worse, is not actually that type of 5. Like, Miles Turner wants the ball. Miles Turner wants to shoot threes, which works well in this 5-out offense, but that unfortunately comes at the expense of him actually being a really great role man, because he's not. And
we're seeing how much they use Dwight Powell as well, and Dwight Powell has lost some of his explosiveness since his major knee injuries. But I just wish JaVale McGee was a little bit better, so you could actually see what you're doing.
JaVale's that exact archetype. Like, obviously he's not as good as these guys, but that's the exact, like, you watch any Phoenix Suns game from the last 2 years, watch CP3 and JaVale in the pick and roll. It's a thing of beauty. JaVale is like a good for Phoenix, he was a good backup center. And the same way that CP3 and Biyombo in the pick and roll is fucking incredible.
Because CP3 is good, not
the guys,
Biyombo.
But Biyombo.
He just jumps.
He sets good screens and he jumps, and that's literally with playing alongside CP3, playing alongside Luka. That's literally all you need to do. So having that element to the offense where you can get consistent, great looks at the rim is, I think, something that they haven't had, and we've seen them. You know, we haven't seen them go like the double big wing look. Those are kind of the harder guys to get in the league. Like Kawhi and PG being on the same team is like a
impossibility.
Once in a lifetime kind of event. But we saw with this offense last season when they're going 3 guys with 2 of them on the court at any one time in Brunson, Dinwiddie, and Luka. That was a great offense in the postseason and in the regular season. But I never felt like that was like an unsolvable offense.
Yeah.
I never felt like that offense was going to go all the way because the fact that your 2 of those like linchpin guys are 6 foot and 6'3" is easier to defend than if there's a big.
Yeah, and then you need 2 good defenders, a big and a small guy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm happy to wrap up this discussion with one final question because this is all great and it's all great in theory and we're talking a lot about theory, but we've seen that the price for superstars has just absolutely skyrocketed in the past 2, 3, 4 off seasons, and whether you're Brooklyn and LA and you can just sign them for nothing, great. This isn't a Brooklyn or LA team, or Golden State actually for that matter, but it's very, very, very hard to get these teams, and if there is a superstar that becomes available, like let's say Bradley Beal or Rudy Gobert's back on the market, something like that. If that person is out there, and the Dallas Mavericks are like, awesome, we're going to put our hand up. We really want to get this player because we want to start to pair with Luka Doncic, no matter what position they play. They're going to be offering all of their future first-round picks, Josh Green, matching salary in Bertans and Tim Hardaway Jr. But we know that because of this really, really high superstar market, the Utah Jazz and the New Orleans Pelicans and all these teams out there just have every single pick under the sun. And even some teams that, you know, aren't very good right now, like the Detroit Pistons, who might actually want to throw their chips in and say, oh, maybe we can do something a little bit more and maybe throw in their picks that are even more valuable. When this player's on the market, all of a sudden that the team that's trading away this superstar is like, well, awesome, I'm sure our player would look amazing next to Luka Doncic, but you've got the 4th best offer for me right now. So I think that's really going to we're going to see that Nico Harrison might have the best intentions to get a superstar right next to his player. But as we just saw in this most recent offseason, all he could get was Christian Wood. Like, he couldn't go out and get anyone better. And, I mean, I'm assuming that, but, like, he would have done it. I'm also assuming that if there was someone better who they could have traded away, you know, let's say they do that thing that Minnesota did where it's like, okay, here's our first-round pick and pick swaps from 2024 till 2029. So, okay, you've got Luka Doncic for all of those years. That's probably going to be in the 20s. I don't really want that. I would much rather go to New Orleans and say, give us a couple of LA picks because they could be, you know, that could be the first overall pick. Are you worried about that when you're talking about seeing the Dallas Mavericks get better?
Yeah, I am worried about that because, you know, those picks are likely going to be in the 15 to 25 range almost every year. And, you know, a team like LA, you mentioned, team like Minnesota, those picks are unstable from the perspective that you don't know how the fuck it's going to go with Gobert and Cat. You know, even the Pelicans' own picks are unstable because what happens if Zion gets injured again? Like those are not guaranteed to be high picks. So those all have, like, you know, much more value than a kind of metronomic steady Dallas pick, which might mean that they're not going to be able to shop at the absolute top of the market. And 2 players that they've been linked with over the last, like, 2 to 6 months, one of which I think would be an absolute travesty, a disaster, and one of whom I think is actually a pretty interesting candidate. The first one is Bradley Beal, because it's not going well in Washington. He's on that absolutely mammoth contract, and, you know, like that, it's felt like both parties needed a separation for the last 3 years, yet somehow it hasn't happened, and they're even more entwined than ever. But the second guy that I think, and I wonder what you think, is Zach LaVine.
Yeah, look, let's not talk about how those Zach LaVine rumors started, because I was actually going to write something about it and they came from almost nothing. But that I would love that. I would love Zach LaVine there. I agree with you a bit in what you said before about just maybe getting a big, because Luka can do so much from the guard positions, and Spencer Dinwiddie's one of my favourite players, so I don't want to see him getting short shrifted there. But yeah, if you can get Zach LaVine, go and do it. But if Zach LaVine is truly on the market and he is actually out there, the Pelicans would easily put up their hand and say, "Oh, okay, we'll do it as well. We can give you matching salary that doesn't impact their starting five."
I think because of the injuries that he's kind of dealt with over the past 2 or 3 seasons, where he hasn't been able to be consistently available every game, Zach LaVine is not quite the top of the market when we're talking about superstars that come available. Everything else, his age profile, his athleticism, his game, awesome. Yeah. So there would definitely be interest, but like, I don't know that he would garner those, like... I don't know that he'd garner a Gobert level deal, a Davis level deal, where you're saying we'll give you 5 years of draft control plus a couple of prospects and matching salary. Yeah. Because you just... You do that for a guy that you feel comfortable is going to be there for the next 5 years. And LaVine, like, the injury situation is not so dramatic, but probably dramatic enough that a team is going to have to really think about what that looks like, which I feel like makes him a little bit more gettable. It doesn't solve their problem at all of, having a big who can actually do something offensively, who's a reliable defensive presence. I mean, I don't know who that guy is that's available. And for instance, like, you wouldn't want to recoup what Minnesota paid to Utah to get Gobert if Gobert did become available. If you moved for a wing or a guard, that potentially frees you up for a lower investment. A guy like Capella, we've been saying since Onyeka Okongwu got drafted, like, Capella's days in Atlanta are limited, and that hasn't proven to be the case because he's so fucking good at what he does with Trae Young on offense. But a guy like Capella would be available for a hell of a lot less. Yeah. So if you make that move for a wing or a guard and try and bring in a role-playing big who can actually play that role, which they haven't had, like, maybe that's the way forward. But I do think what you're worried about is really a realistic occurrence where they're going to kind of be capped out of that absolute top of the market because they don't have
the top of the market money to spend.
They don't have the money, but they don't have the they don't have the capital. Like, whatever picks they can offer, which is going to be far fewer in terms of quantity than anybody else, are also not as valuable. So that's something that they will have to figure out over the coming seasons.
All right, just before we go to a short break, I'll just list all of the nicknames that Luka Doncic has on Basketball Reference. There's Luka Magic, The Matador, El Matador, Cool Hand, The Don, Wonder Boy, El Nino, Maravilla, Swaggy L, and Luka Legend, and Too Easy. What the fuck is Cool Hand?
Cool Hands is Benjamin Stark from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, right. Didn't know.
What's your favourite out of that?
Probably El Nino.
I'm going to just going to give you a little help here. Famously, you have struggled with pronunciation on the show. But that little squiggle on top of the N, it's a nya.
Yeah, so how do you
El
say
Nino.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
I mean, you're saying it wrong. You're going around.
All right, sorry. My favorite Swaggy L.
Swaggy L.
What's your favorite?
I'm a Luka Legend man, but I'm confused why El Nino, Maravilla, and El Matador are in there because he's not fucking Spanish. He's literally.
I googled Maravilla. Nothing's coming up.
He's from the other side of Europe.
Yeah, but he played for Real. So.
Spain is the second westernmost country in Europe, and this guy's from Slovenia, famously in Eastern Europe. Anyway, let's take a break and people can chew on those Luka nicknames.
The depth, the deep two. God, that's a mouthful. Anyways, I'm Marco, co-host of the Hey, Daniel Gafford, what's the name of our podcast?
The JVG NBA Tribute Show.
Wow, I can't believe it's that easy. Thanks, Gaff. You probably know us as two members of the four-man weave plus Marco, but we know you as our next listener.
Well said, Lucas. I gotta ask, how do we differ from the pack of basketball podcasts?
It's a great question, Marco. You see, on our basketball podcast, we have 2 male co-hosts.
Wow, truly groundbreaking. After this episode, stay on your favorite podcasting app and give us a spin.
All right, we are back, and a little bit of news wrap up before we wrap up. First one coming from Brian Windhorst of ESPN, that the Washington Wizards have interest in trading for Jae Crowder. They join maybe 4 other teams that also have interest in Jae Crowder, the Bucks and the Suns, among others. But this is probably the most realistic trade for Jae Crowder because unlike the Bucks, not the Suns, he plays for the Suns, the Hawks. Unlike these other teams, the Wizards actually have matching salary that they can actually throw back that doesn't impact the Suns whatsoever. They just get a warm body in return, being Rui Hachimura or Denny Avdia, because I think the Suns did say they would prefer to get a forward back in any deal, which makes sense given their roster situation. So just assuming there's no picks changing hands, you're just simply getting a prospect/player here. Would you want to do any machination of a Wizards deal if it gives you back one of these forwards who aren't really good?
Well, that's the key thing.
That's a leading question, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, you're leading me to the obvious answer, which is that neither of them are actually really good, Rui or Denny. I mean, neither of them have established themselves as like an efficient offensive threat. Like Denny's barely established himself as a threat to score. I mean, like, he kind of is tantalizing in the sense that like he can clearly kind of defend a few positions, and he's a smart player, moves the ball, like he would fit well in a healthy offensive ecosystem. But like, all we got to do is talk to our friend and co-host of the JVG NBA Tribute Show, Lucas Petridis, and ask him what he thinks of Denny. Before you kind of reveal the cracks that are there in his game. Things that we don't love here at the Deep 2 are 6'9" forwards that are barely shooting 40% from the field. That's not something that we're particularly into. And before
you've already got Dario Saric.
Don't ask me what number it starts with. Just don't.
Well, I've got a question for you. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
Would you do Jae Crowder for Corey Kispert?
I'd have to think.
2 more years on his rookie contract.
To think about that
after this one.
Yeah, I think
saving $7 million, because obviously you're also thinking about the tax savings here.
Me as a Suns fan, I'm thinking about the tax savings here. Whatever I can do to ease Robert Sarver's bill on his way out the door, I'm willing to do it. I think that actually is more appealing, because I think whilst it's a question whether Kispert has more long-term upside than either Rui or Denny,
he can hit threes.
He's got a more defined role, and he's kind of better at something that we need. And we talked about a few weeks ago about what a Strus trade with Miami might look like.
Yeah, that's very similar, isn't it?
And whilst neither of them address what I think is the most pressing need, which is to bring in another 4-sized player, they both kind of bring an elite skill set that's going to just fit in with this offense, and they're going to see game time, and they're going to hit what they're going to hit. So I think I probably would lean Kispert over either of these guys. I mean, for me, like, of the teams that have been heavily linked, I think a deal with the Bucks, which is the hardest to get done, but something involving Bobby Portis would be really, really appealing for me, because I think that's the exact kind of player that we need. And in theory, Rui could potentially do something similar, but he's actually just not as good a scorer as Bobby is, and he's really not as good a defender as Bobby is. Not that Bobby is elite, but Bobby is like
he played on a title team,
the full role player that we want. But yeah, to answer your question, I think I would probably look at Kispert over either of these guys, despite not addressing the positional need that we have.
But also just to look at it like, hey, Jae Crowder's not playing basketball right now. Imagine just adding another wing size.
Another wing size guy who can shoot.
It can't hurt. And also the fact that you don't have to muck around with the third team, pay them a second round pick to do X, Y, and Z. It's very clean.
And not for nothing, the salary bill.
Do the Wizards do that? Would they do Jae for Corey Kispert. I should probably check if it works financially, but
I mean, like Jay's contract is almost certainly bigger than Kispert's contract, which would rely on the Wizards having room to take in. Which I don't know if you know, but Bill's getting paid $50 million this year.
The Wizards need to cut $5 million on top of that to make the money work, which is about a Rui or Denny sized human. So okay, that's probably not on the cards. Man, it's just hard to trade. You really need a big, strong shooting forward like Jae Crowder on your team.
We do, don't we?
How do you get one?
Jeez, if I knew, we wouldn't be here.
All right, you want to move on, or any final comments there?
Nah, let's move on to everyone's favourite alleged greatest shooting big man of all time.
Yeah, so Dirk Nowitzki is actually out 4 to 6 weeks.
Something crazy, just to do a little callback to the start of the episode where we talked about Luka legend El Nino Maravilla. He and this is courtesy of a great article on The Athletic by Tim Cato. He has as many 40-point games career as Dirk.
Yeah, wow, that's cool.
And he's played 4.25 NBA seasons.
Karl-Anthony Towns is out 4 to 6 weeks after a non-contact calf injury. I don't know if you saw the video, but no one actually did, because it was right at the edge, and he just sort of tripped over himself as the.
No, but you see him go down though, and there's no one in the vicinity.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So no structural damage, but obviously with an injury like something that we've seen / inverted commas seen. Yeah, you really have to be careful here. This report coming from Shams Charania and John Krasinski of The Athletic, you really have to be careful that this could lead to something major. So this 4 to 6 weeks is 4 to 6 weeks. Did the Wolves win their game today? They were playing with it's just a worse version of the Utah Jazz when they play games today.
Yeah,
they beat the Grizzlies by 8 points. I watched the start of that but didn't finish it. Yeah, I mean, they can't play worse than they can at the moment, but you'd really like to see the two bigs try and fit and work together.
Well, in a perverse way, it's almost better for their offense because they can play a simplified brand of basketball and really kind of look for that vertical.
Yeah, Slow-Mo's been the guy who's getting the call up at the 4 there.
But in the long term, it's terrible for their offensive chemistry because they obviously need reps. But I mean, I think the overwhelming sentiment here has to be, if you're the Wolves, you're just grateful that it's not an Achilles, because if a guy is running and falls over and is clutching his ankle, that's an Achilles tendon.
Yeah.
And if a guy who's 7 foot tall and weighs 260 pounds tears your Achilles, like it's probably a coin flip as to whether he ever makes another All-Star game.
Yeah.
An Achilles injury would be absolutely devastating, and Kat is not the sort of player who could rebound easily from that. So the fact that it's a calf injury. Famously, the calf does go for quite a long time, and a former Golden State Warrior had a calf injury that he came back from in the NBA Finals that turned into an Achilles tear.
Andrew Bogut?
Yeah, you fucking nailed it. So definitely something to, you're taking the 4 to 6 weeks and probably 2 weeks after that as well, just to make absolutely sure. But for the Wolves in the short term, they'll miss their best player, but maybe gives them an opportunity to kind of coax Gobert into taking more than 2 shots a game, which has sometimes been a bit difficult.
Yeah, that's everything for this week. Dante, I will speak to you next week.
I'll speak to you next week.
Peace. We were over the moon when we first heard that the NBA was going to be televised on Australian free-to-air TV in the 2019-20 season. It didn't exactly go swimmingly, with the nasty cough halting the season and games getting cancelled left, right and centre, but it was a huge step and an exciting one for basketball fans all across the country.
Better yet, it wasn't a commercial channel cashing in on some basketball nerds like us. It was SBS, one of our public broadcasters. Unfortunately, the NBA wasn't the only thing SBS was pushing last season. They also ran advertisements from Sportsbet, Ladbrokes, Bet365, BetEasy, and Neds, some of the biggest sports betting companies in Australia.
In a 1 step forwards, 2 steps backwards move, SBS has dropped the ball here. As a public broadcaster, SBS plays a key role in providing relevant, culturally appropriate health information to local communities. The last thing SBS should be doing is offering a platform for gambling companies during the most financially unstable time in recent memory.
This past year, men aged 18 to 24 made up 79% of new gambling account holders, with increased median spending and frequency of bets. This is the last thing we should be spending our money on given the financial uncertainty that comes with the pandemic. During COVID lockdowns, wagering companies spent more money on advertising and incentives to gamble, and it worked. SBS needs to hear from viewers that gambling ad revenue isn't worth the harm it causes. Call on the SBS chair, George Savitas, to put community health ahead of gambling revenue by signing the petition at www.endgamblingads.org.au/get gambling off SBS with hyphens